Hey, it's Jay Baer from Convince and Convert, joined as always by my special Texas friend. He's the executive strategist for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. It is Mr. Adam Brown. And wow, we just heard an amazing soundbite there from Lindsey Hancock, our guest this week on the show. This is a good episode. She really gets it in terms of engaging with an audience.
That is such an important piece. And Lindsay demonstrates that whether you're a small organization or a large organization, you can create compelling content that drives that level of engagement, but how important it is for the brand to respond back appropriately and accordingly. And I think that's something that we oftentimes miss.
Yeah, I thought it was really fascinating what she talks about in this episode, that every interaction with everybody is an opportunity to create content, right? She talked about using complaint letters as social media content. She talked about, answering unhappy customers and making fun of them, not in a malicious way, but in a way that turns it into content. And I think it's a really enlightened view of how social media works today, both on the proactive marketing side, but also the reactive customer service side.
I agree, and I think Lindsay demonstrates that she understands that balance, like you just spoke to. You can't be visceral, you can't be rude to your listener, but you have to find that right balance of being clever, of kind of giving them a little bit of wink, even if you are kind of in way playing with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also like that we had Lindsay on the show this week because she's one of the people, and this happens all the time in social, who started off working for a brand and now is off doing her own thing as a consultant. So we talked to her about that a little bit in the show as well, what that transition is like and how it works being out there on your own in the big bad world of social media today. You're going to enjoy this episode with Lindsey Hancock. Her new company is called Brand Vixen. Before we jump into the rest of the show with Lindsey, want to acknowledge this week's sponsors. As always, our friends at Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And Adam, big news because you just released the fifth State of Marketing report, which is chock-a-block full of unbelievable insights from Salesforce. 4,100, I think, marketing leaders were interviewed for this study, which is an unbelievable data set. And you'll learn when you download this, and I really want you to download this, ladies and gentlemen, the impact of CX on marketing, how the role of social media is changing, how critical AI is in 2019 and beyond, and like a bunch of other stuff. It is a blockbuster. It's the State of Marketing report from Salesforce. I made a short URL for it just so I could remember it. It's bit.ly/Jay says. bit.ly/Jay says, Jaysays, Jay says, bit.ly Jay says, so that I say that you should download this. So please go ahead and do that. It's good stuff, eh?
I like the implied endorsement there with the bit.ly. Yes, but it is a great report. This is the fourth year we've done it. We talked to over 4,000 marketers about what keeps them up at night and what they're doing and not doing that's delivering success for their respective brands.
Also, this week, the show is brought to you by our new benefactors at socialmedia.org, which is the quintessential organization for medium-sized and large brand social media managers. Adam, you've got familiarity with your organization. You used to be in socialmedia.org. In fact, you were one of the founding members of that organization back in the day.
I was in the organization twice, at Coca-Cola and at Dell, and it's a great place to go when you need to find people just like us, and be able to talk to them and communicate them and throw ideas around. So oftentimes we don't have the ability to look at another social media practitioner in our office because we're the sole social media practitioner. Yep. Socialmedia.org gives us that opportunity to find people just like us.
It's one of the most unbelievable organizations you can be a part of. If you are in charge of social media for a medium-sized or large brands, I really, really, really encourage you to consider socialmedia.org membership. If you're like me, a consultant, or like Adam, who works for a vendor, neither of us are eligible anymore. They kicked us out because we're on the vendor side. But if you're on the brand side, socialmedia.org is a place you can get your problem solved. You can find that community of like-minded individuals and take your career to the next level, most importantly. Here's how you do it. Go to socialmedia.org/socialpros. That's socialmedia.org/socialpros. Fill out the form. They'll screen it, make sure that you meet the qualifications. And if you do, you're in, and we would love for you to be part of it. A lot of the folks here, guests here on the program, are part of the socialmedia.org community. And fun fact, next week on Social Pros, our special guest will be Andy Cernovitz, who is the founder of socialmedia.org. So we'll talk a little bit more about it next week. And now, without further ado, please give your ears or your eyes, if you're watching us on iTunes or on YouTube, attention to Lindsey Hancock, this week's guest on the Social Pros podcast. Lindsey Hancock, head of Brand Vixen in Lexington, Kentucky. Welcome to Social Pros.
Thanks for having me.
We are delighted to have you here on the program. You have a really interesting background, one that we don't actually talk about that much on the show, in that you used to do social media for a brand, and now you're doing it as a consultant. Talk a little bit about the differences between working for an organization. You were at Big Ass Fans, which is still one of the all-time greatest brand names. Actually, let's do it this way. For people who are not familiar, describe the Big Ass Fans brand and what you did for them on the social side, and then we'll talk about what you're doing today.
Sure. Big Ass Fans is an HVLS fan company, and they were smart enough to build a brand around their name. So a lot of people used to call in and say, "Are you the ones that sell those big ass fans?" And they were actually started as
yes, we are.
Yeah. So they started as HVLS fan company, and they realized Big Ass Fans, way better name. And they made their mascot a donkey. So the marketing really took off. So half of my job was done, of course. And I served as the social media director, and I managed global social media, US, Canada, Singapore, you name it. And I came up with the content, the ideas, the copy, the planning, the scheduling. So all of that was in my jurisdiction. And it made my job so easy to work for such a fun brand. And I got to do a lot of stuff that I know I'll probably never get to do again, like going to Las Vegas and campaigning for our mascot for president. That was a lot of fun.
They really are big ass fans, right? I mean, they're like many feet in diameter, and you put them inside a warehouse or something like that to keep it cool. Is that the general principle?
Yes. They go up all the way up to 24 foot. So definitely big ass fans.
There's actually one at a Torchy's Tacos right close to my house here in Austin, Texas. And I will tell you, Lindsey, this happened like 2 years ago before I even had any inkling that you were going to be on the show. But I looked at the fan, saw the name, laughed out loud, pulled out my phone, and went to Twitter and found them and found some of what I'm assuming was your work. And again, laughed out loud.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so much fun. It was just jokes all day. Whenever people asked me what I did, I was like, I think I tell jokes for a living. I don't know.
So if you're creating social content for a brand like that if you take the name out of it, right, which is hilarious, and you just say, what do you make? We make big fans. A lot of people in social get caught up in, well, our brand's not interesting. Our brand's like, we don't make things that are fun. We're not Pepsi. We're not Burger King. In this case, you're selling fans, which is not in and of itself super intriguing to most people. So what do you do from a content standpoint? Does it become fan pornography, right? Let me just show you all kinds of different fans. Is that sort of the visual motif, or do you do something different?
Right. You really have to play to the strengths of the fans. They're super effective. They save a ton of money. They are beautiful. And people love, everybody has the same story when they see those fans. I walked into a store, I looked up, and I was like, wow, that's a big ass fan. And then my buddy next to me said, it really is a big ass fan. I don't know. Every day I heard that same story, and everybody thought it was a unique story, but they all have the same one. So it's really just about playing to the strengths.
In a brand like that, how does the executive team think about the role of social, right? I suspect people aren't gonna be like, great tweet, how do I buy a fan? Do you guys take PayPal? That's probably not quite the way the customer journey works. So how do you conceptualize the role of social and sort of how social helps the brand make money or save money or both?
It's definitely a considered purchase. And if you think about, not that many people are going to need a huge industrial fan. So it's kind of building that loyalty to the brand. A lot of people wanted to buy a big ass fan just because of the personality of the company. And
they want to put one like on their patio, right? And you're like, yeah, we don't do that.
We did have some patio fans, but it really is building that loyalty and having that big audience of followers who serve as a vehicle for your message.
And I think to that point, Lindsey, measuring the success of your social programs in an organization like that, where you said it is a considered purchase, they are going to do their research. You certainly have competitors, but I think with your brand recognition, you're in a little bit different strata. Talk a little bit about how you would go back to your leadership and show them and demonstrate them the ROI that your social programs were delivering.
A lot of what I focused on was the engagement with the brand, because since I was focused mainly on organic, I would do all the content. And if the engagement rate was really high, it just proved that we were giving the people what they wanted to see and not just what we wanted to tell them. And sometimes that's a little hard to measure, but whenever we did have ads that we ran, I mean, the engagement on them was amazing, the web traffic. So really it was, and some things were hard to prove and others were just kind of obvious.
As you told us before the show was obviously that you are now owner of Brand Vixen and doing kind of your own thing, but the challenges of being a one-person band, both at Big S Fans and now as you kind of do your entrepreneurial sole proprietorship right now, the challenges of being creative, of being edgy, of coming up with new content each and every day. I think that's a challenge probably a lot of our listeners have. And I'm curious kind of how you push through and how you came to work every day with ideas for new social posts, a new angle, a new way of getting things done. I know that's something that's I think is going to be really interesting to our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely the most difficult part. Before I started doing social media, I actually went to school for creative advertising. So I started a little early on that path, and I didn't really consider social media for myself. And then when I got into it, I was like, this is a perfect match for my skill set, which is creativity. I love the variety of it. And really it's just sitting down and looking at what you've done before that's been successful and iterating off of that. I always tell people not to look at their competitors too much, because you'll get a creative block almost from seeing what they did. If it's something you want to beat, or, you know, you end up competing with them, and really you should be competing with yourself to always improve on your results.
One question I get a lot from my colleagues here at Salesforce is, Adam, what do you read every day to kind of keep you up on what's going on in social? What do you look at? Where do you get your ideas? And I'm sure this is something that maybe people even ask you as you now have your own kind of social media and marketing communications agency. What keeps you on edge? What gives you that kind of extra piece of information other than, of course, listening to Social Pros?
I am always training and taking webinars and listening to podcasts like Social Pros. I actually went to Social Media Marketing World last year, and I saw you, Jay, actually moderating a panel. So I am just
That's
constantly.
Never a good way to spend an afternoon, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
It was pretty good.
Good.
It was Krispy Kreme was also there, so
yeah, Krispy Kreme.
That helped.
Yes, she's been on the show. She's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really just consuming as much content as possible. That's not a very, I guess, exciting answer, but really you just have to read and be willing to be, you're curious and inquisitive. And that's really how I make it work.
One of the things that again, you shared with us before the show was something that I really, really liked. You talked about your promotional presence, and you talked about it in a way that you've had to pivot a little bit. As having your own organization, we oftentimes talk about our social presence and our personal kind of positioning online and our professional positioning online. But you talked about your promotional presence, and I love those two words. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and kind of how you present yourself both in that space between your personal space and your business space, and how you do it to, in case, drive more followers for you and to drive more followers for your new organization.
Sure. Yeah, that's been the hardest thing for me, because I don't want to necessarily be an influencer. And I think I joked about I've joked about standing on my chair while I'm having brunch and taking a photo of my food. Like, that is just not, I've always wanted to be kind of behind the scenes. I joked that at Big Ass Fans, I felt like the Wizard of Oz, because no one really knew who I was. And I would, a lot of people would say, your social team is great, or the guy who runs your social is amazing. And I love that, because you're so anonymous and the people get to connect with whoever they want. They just imagine you to be someone. So putting myself out there, as my own entity, I knew I had to have a social presence because I'm not going to trust someone to do my social if they can't do their own. And a lot of agencies and social agencies I see, they have a terrible following, or they just put quote overlays over nice photos that they didn't take. So I'm really trying to insert some of my presence. My dog Remy Hendrix makes a lot of appearances on my channel. So
I think your dog has his own channel, right? Is that true?
He does. It actually came from, I broke my phone and I lost almost all of his puppy photos. So I was like, my friends don't want to see this many photos of my dog, so I'll give him his own channel. So.
Nice. Well done. When you take clients on board now at Brand Vixen, what's the first thing you do? Do you look at what they're doing in social today? Or so what's sort of that step 1, 2, 3 when you're like, okay, new client, new opportunity?
Usually I'll talk to them about their goals and what they want to get out of social. And then I will typically suggest a strategy for them. I try not to I don't want to take over anyone's social without doing a strategy first, because if you don't have a foundation, there's no way for you to succeed. So I usually do that. And I start with a questionnaire that really gets down to the nitty gritty of everything that they are looking for, their competitors, just to get a feel of, because you can look at it from the outside, but if you have a different idea of what their goals should be, then you're going to end up clashing there.
And obviously, it depends a little bit on the client circumstances and the industry they're in, et cetera. But are there things that, in general, you would advise clients to do less of in 2019?
I think that a lot of people aren't doing enough. A lot of what I see is that they're not engaging with the people who are there, or they're just constantly trying to seek out ways to get new followers. So I guess that's one thing I would say. Don't focus on that so much. Why would you want to get a huge following if you're not engaging with the people you already have? So start there, and then the people will come. If you post it, they will come.
If you post it, they will come. One of the things that you talked about before the show is that because of the name Big Ass Fans, which in some corners could be interpreted as a little bit risque, maybe in the Adam sort of Texas deep South, maybe that's even in Kentucky, perhaps people are like,
it matters where you put the emphasis.
Yes.
Is the emphasis on ass or fans?
Right. Well said. But Lindsey, I think you said that there were some people out there on the socials who were offended or sort of would complain about the name of the company, et cetera, and that you had to interact with those folks in social. Tell us a little bit about that and how you handled it and kind of what your advice is in terms of facing criticism in social media. Sure.
A lot of the people just had a problem with the name, and you're not going to win with those people. So I like to razz them a little bit sometimes. If you have to really see the difference between a troll and someone who you can maybe get a little entertainment out of. And often if I would joke back with them, of course you're never malicious. If I would kind of razz them a little bit, then they end up being a fan of your brand too, because they were putting it out there kind of thinking you'd never have the guts to respond back. But also if you get some of that, we got hate mail, and a lot of it was from way back when they first changed the name. So I would
actually with a stamp on it, like in the mail.
But these were like 10 years old. But I could post that and make a joke out of it, of course, blurring out the names. And I mean, those by far got some of the most engagement. It's compliment city basically, because people are just like, oh, they're wrong, and how could they not love your brand?
So I just want to make sure I understand this tactic. So you would go into like the dead letter file at Big Ass Fans, find like angry complaint letters from 10 years ago, take photos of them and put them in social.
Yes, absolutely. And they were amazingly, you couldn't have written them better. Sometimes people thought that they were fake, but they absolutely never faked one. They were just pure gold.
Okay, we're going to find one of those and put it in the show notes at socialpros.com because that's going to be something that all of our listeners should be entertained by. Go to socialpros.com to see one of Lindsey's fantastic hate letter exchanges from Big Ass Fans. Just as a reminder, every single episode we've ever done on this show, now in our 9th season, Adam.
9th season. You can find the transcripts and all the show notes and the links and the audio at socialpros.com. Man, when we started doing this show, I was trying to think like, okay, Snapchat didn't exist, Instagram didn't exist, Pinterest didn't exist. Like a lot of the things we talked about weren't even a glimmer in their parents' eye. And now here we are. And now here we are. And even and kind of to that point, Jay, one of the things, Lindsey, that you shared with us was that from a business standpoint, as you continue to curate and build your agency business, LinkedIn and Instagram are the two most important channels. One of those that's been around for about the 9 years that we've been around. Other Instagram has not. Curious to see the two of those put together. You oftentimes don't see LinkedIn and Instagram mentioned in the same sentence. Talk a little bit about that and how you're using both of those to build rapport and business for your agency.
Sure. One thing I noticed for LinkedIn, and this was kind of a surprise to me, it didn't happen until I had decided to leave Big Ass Fans and start my own company, which I'd been working on for quite some time before I actually took the leap. And I put an announcement on all of my social channels that it was pretty lengthy about why I'd chosen to leave and about my time there. And when I put that up on LinkedIn, I think I had like 500 connections myself, and I got 12,000 views, I think, on that. So
Wow.
Just from people sharing and commenting, and my network was invaluable to me. I haven't had to actually seek out any work yet because of LinkedIn and referrals. And I knew it was important for me to strike while I had that reputation of doing the social media for Big Ass Fans, because I was somewhat known for that. And I mean, that was how LinkedIn was just played a huge role in me getting business. And so then for Instagram, on the other hand, it's more of where I show my personality and kind of show more of what I can do. Because if I'm, clever or funny or posting beautiful images on Instagram, then that gives people a little more idea of the work I could be doing for them.
I think a big part of that, Lindsey, is your success and your cleverness and things like that. But timing, I think, is also a really important part of what you just mentioned. And kind of to go back to one of the things that bugs you around engagement is either not responding at all or taking too long to respond to customers. Probably something that's easier to do in a smaller to medium-sized organization, because typically the social media practitioner themselves is also the person who's responding or engaging. In a larger organization, there could be an entire department that does those types of things. I'm curious, when you sit down with your clients right now, how you talk to them about engagement, how you talk to them about the responsibility of being and ensuring that two-way line of communication with your social media customers and engagers and participants. How does that work? And do you see any tension or overall receptiveness to that idea?
I think a lot of people are realizing now that engagement is key. I think that even if they don't know as much about social media as we do, they're invested in that, and they'll kind of do whatever you tell them to do, which is the great part of working with these smaller companies. And I tell them too, if you have a fun, playful brand and you're posting interesting content, and then you have the Charlie Brown voice answering the people with the actual customer service concerns and doing the canned responses of, we're so sorry to hear that you had that problem and we'll get back to you, blah, blah, blah. Nobody wants to hear that. If I'm mad enough to complain and that's how you approach me, I'm even more angry. So I think that there's a genuine quality that you have to engage as well. It's not just saying back to someone the same thing over and over again. And if I'm seeing comments and you're under my comment, you've said the same exact thing to everyone else, it's kind of a waste of your time.
It's hard though, because a lot of times in a customer service situation, a lot of individuals feel like that's not the place for personality, right? And so you feel like, oh, we're doing it right by being boring because nobody wants a clown if they have a complaint. But I think you're exactly right. I mean, I wrote a whole book about it. But it's amazing even now how many brands either A, don't respond to public complaints, which is still, slow suicide, and B, when they do, it's just copy and paste, right? It's right out of like the legal manual, which doesn't feel very psychologically satisfying to anybody.
Right, and that negative feedback is just as important as any positive feedback.
Or so, I would say.
Right, and if you're not, also there's a responsibility as the social media person or persons to get that feedback to the rest of your team, good or bad. If customer service, especially when I worked at Big Ass Fans, they didn't often hear as much positive feedback because they're dealing with a lot of the negatives. So I would try to make sure.
And also, what's the positive? Yep, the fan still goes in a circle. I like what
Right.
I mean, what no one's gonna write in a letter. It still cools the room. It just there's
Right.
no catalyst for conversation there.
And I will say that Big Ass Fans customer service is pretty amazing. I mean, they go above and beyond to help people. So often there were comments that would come in and say, I had this problem, and they took care of it immediately, and it was so great. So I always made sure to get that information back to customer service as well.
And Lindsey, I'm a little curious about that because I think that's one of the untold aspects of what we do as social media practitioners. Without a doubt, we're marketers. Without a doubt, we're public relations professionals. Without a doubt, we're customer service folks. But you're kind of hitting on the kind of research and development side of what we have the ability to do because we are listening to the zeitgeist. We're the ones that have our pulse on what our customers are saying about us as well as our competitors. I'm curious if you have any tools that you use to get that information back to either people at the clients you're working with today or at Big Ass Fans. I mean, is it reports? Is it sitting down with them? Is it having weekly meetings? What are those tactics to kind of embed all the things that you're hearing into the organization and hopefully have the organization
writes a long letter and puts a stamp on it and then mails it.
Right.
There you go.
A lot of attention that way.
And I put something hateful in there to catch their attention too.
Oh, good idea.
Really, a lot of the people I work with and Big Ass Fans, the C-suite, were very interested in what we were doing. And since your kind of resume is all just out in public for them to see, they would stop by and, ask me how something had done. And then as far as getting the feedback into our team, we actually use Salesforce to do that. So I would put in feedback that I got that I thought was relevant constantly. I was putting it in. But I'm a little bit of a control freak. I probably could have had a line of people to do that, but I am just like very much, I want to see everything and I want to assign individual components to the right person to make sure they get answered.
I know one of the things that you told us a little about earlier, and you mentioned was kind of freelancing, and that you were doing a little bit of freelancing as you began that transition over to creating your own agency. And one of the reasons for it was you felt a little bit burnout, and it was the freelancing that gave you this opportunity to spark your inner creativity to kind of get jump started. And I'm curious if that's something that you recommend to listeners if they are feeling a little bit tired, if they're having trouble kind of coming up with new and engaging ideas.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed the variety of it, and I didn't know that I would enjoy it as much as I did. I worked at Big Ass Fans for a while, and I thought that I had so many ideas, and then all of a sudden I got to a point and I was like, I think I might be out of ideas for fans. And I wasn't. It was just I wasn't thinking outside of the box I'd put myself in. And I think that if you're looking at what other industries that people are involved in, and you can do some creative things for them, that's only going to make you better at your day job. So I think definitely people are afraid that their time will be, stretched too thin, or their attention will be stretched too thin. But really it did the opposite for me. And it really sparked more creativity.
Lindsey Hancock, owner of Brand Vixen, it is so great to have you on the show. You mentioned a little bit earlier on that you have your degree in creative advertising. And I'm curious if you felt that major and that discipline really set you up for social media. And did you go directly into social media, or was this just kind of one of the stops on your career to get to this point?
Well, since I was 13, I think, and I probably watched a movie or something that inspired me to really want to be a creative director. I knew what I wanted to be. And I went to UK and I majored in creative advertising, loved it. And then I graduated and I was like, I moved back to Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where I'm from. And I just applied to every job. I was like, I got to get back to Lexington. I got to get out of this small town. And then I actually ended up working for an architecture and engineering firm. And I was doing marketing proposals, and I was good at it, and it was copy, but I just was very uninspired. And I was thankful for the opportunity, but I looked around my town and what I could feasibly, get involved with. And Big Ass Fans was kind of one of those coveted places to work. And so I applied with them, and they luckily had me in for a meeting. And I actually started there doing a little bit of different, some email, some kind of promotional things. And then I went to them and I was like, I really would love to do something a little more creative. And then they just recommended, they were like, I think you'd be a really good fit for the social media position. And so that's kind of how that started.
That's fantastic. Now I want to know, Lindsey, at what point you decided to organize all your candy before you eat it, because that is the most fascinating Lindsey Hancock fact. I want to, so like if you've got a roll of Lifesavers, which I know is a very throwback candy, do you take them all out of the wrapper and then like organize them by color? Same thing with Starburst. Like tell me a little bit more about this OCD candy problem that you have.
Yeah, I don't know when I started doing it, but I've always been really into patterns. Like my family makes fun of me about it. Like if I go to Cracker Barrel, those little games that they have before I play
the
it,
triangle jumping game. Yeah,
I put them in order too. I don't know. It's like cute OCD, I think. But when I do it a lot with Skittles, and I put them all out in a row, and it has to be a pattern of some kind. And it doesn't really I don't organize them by color necessarily, but it's gonna be some kind of pattern. If it's not, I can't handle it. And I actually was doing it one time at work, and someone walked up behind me, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here."
Nothing to see here. Your Skittles sponsorship is going to come through any minute now.
Yes.
That you've been on. So actually, I was wondering if iTunes is going to mark this episode as explicit because it's big ass fans. I can't wait to see. That's going to be fun.
Maybe. Yeah, my mom's favorite thing to do to me when I started working there was whenever we are around our family members that were, a little older, she'd always be like, ask her what she does for a living. So I'd have to say that to them.
Lindsey, I want to ask you the two questions that we've asked everybody here on the show, now 350 episodes, whatever the number we're at. First question is, what one tip would you give somebody who's looking to become a social pro?
I think that the most important thing, especially for me, that I've realized is you have to develop a rapport with the executive level, with your clients, and a trust level. Because if you don't, you'll find that they'll try to do it themselves, and they'll call you at midnight in a panic because they want to add a hashtag to a post from a week ago, and you don't want to end up being just a pair of hands that's typing. That's a waste of your time and theirs. And so really, I think that for me means if something is working well, I'll shoot over an email and say, hey, since we made that tweak to this campaign, we've seen these results. Or, hey, this isn't working. Here's what I plan to do about it. And then when that inevitably starts working, you'll be able to go back and say that thing that wasn't working, now it is because of that change. And that'll make your life so much easier.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think that's well done. Last question for Lindsey Hancock of Brand Vixen. Look her up on the social medias at Brand Vixen. Is if you could do a video call with any living person, who would it be? Is this like a John Calipari answer? Like how UK oriented are you?
I mean, John's cool, but I would I know where his house is. I could just go knock. It'd be fine. I think I would have to say Julia Louis-Dreyfus because she's been in the news a little bit for that Mark Twain Award. So maybe that's fine. Yeah. But she is just amazingly funny, and her career has been she has made all the right decisions. And on Seinfeld, which everybody loves Seinfeld, if they don't, I just don't trust them that much, especially if they like Frasier over Seinfeld.
You don't trust my children then. I think the humor doesn't quite get all the way down to Gen Z. They're like, I don't understand why this is funny. And I'm like,
yeah, well, it's a show about nothing, but she really made her stamp there because they had centered that show around Jerry, and then there were two other male leads, and she just was always constantly pushing them literally and figuratively, and she just made herself be known. And I think that's so important.
That's a great answer, and one I don't think we've ever had on this show.
Surprising too.
Yeah. Well done, Lindsey. A brand new answer to that question, which is always exciting for Adam and myself. Lindsey, thank you so much for being on the show. Congratulations with the success of Brand Vixen, and obviously your work at Big Ass Fans goes without saying, although we talked about it here today. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom here on the Social Pros podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We're delighted to have you. Friends, don't forget that Social Pros is also now available on YouTube. So if you want to see Adam and myself, and of course, Lindsey, you can go to my YouTube channel, Jay Bear, and find the show there. Also, as I mentioned, every show, every episode, every recording, everything is at socialpros.com. Until next week, I'm Jay Bear from Convince and Convert. He is Adam Brown from Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and this has been your favorite podcast in the whole world. This has been Social Pros.